Uh, Morning, everyone. Anyway, if we can move on to the agenda, then if we move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. Have we got any this morning, Sarah, to report?
Yes, we've got Councillor Daniel Diach and Councillor Mark Spencer giving their apologies.
Right, thanks very much for that. And anyone else that anybody knows of? No. Right. If you want to go on to item 2, then roll call. If you want to go through that, just to check everybody is on.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Colbrand.
Yes, I am here, but once again, I've got connection problems on my phone, so I've got no video. Sorry about that.
That's fine, as long as I can hear you. That's good. Councillor Drake.
Present.
Good morning. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Hodgins. Can't see Councillor Hodgins. Councillor Hussey.
Yeah, present.
Good morning. Councillor Morgans.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Smith.
Present.
Hello. And Councillor White. Councillor White, can you hear me?
Councillor White is on the call, Sarah.
Ah, right, okay.
You said White, I'm here, David White here.
Oh, hello, Councillor White. Thank you very much. That concludes the roll call, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to everyone. You got to excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. If you item 3 now, declarations of interest, has anybody got any?
I don't.
No, the only one I've got is Newin is mentioned in the report
Me.
as usual. That's it then. So, and anybody got any declarations of interest? They can please mention it as we're going through the meeting, if you remember, under the Local Government Act 2000. If you could do that, please. And move on to item 4. I haven't really got any announcements, but what I am going to say is, this is our last meeting of this, the FAPM, before the elections. And first of all, I'd like to thank all the members who have sat on this committee for their work, their diligence, and I hope they're successful in their future and for their selections. And on the last part, I'd like to thank all the staff for the tremendous support, the information and the agendas given to each meeting. So I'd like to thank them on my behalf and everybody else's. So thank you very much. Anybody like to add anything to, on that comments? Now you come in.
Like you, Chairman, to say thank you very much to the officers for their support in sorting out my technical.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Val.
Also, Steve, I'd like to thank you for chairing the meetings. You kept us up to speed up to date, so thank you very much.
That's a good idea.
It's been a pleasure
Thanks,
to work
Dave.
with everyone. Thanks for that, David.
Yeah, Steve, can I say thank you as well, Susan? I'm new to this, so it was you invited me, been very good, and yourself and all the committee. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's been a pleasure working with everyone anyway. If we now move on to item 5, then it's to receive the minutes of the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee held on Monday, 7th of March 2022, and that's on page 3. So we go through page by page. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Would anybody like to raise any points regarding that?
Not to raise a point, Chairman, but there was a reference there to me asking for some information about Monmouthshire, which I duly got from that manager. So thanks very much to the officer, and I'm happy to move them.
Thank you. Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second those.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Right. If we move on to the next item then, is item 6, which is the Internal Audit Annual Plan 2022 to 2023. And I think that's Lisa Mullen.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the annual audit plan for 2022 and 23 for consideration and approval by members. So Steve Goley is with us this morning from TIAA, our internal audit team, to take us through the detail of the plan. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Lisa. Morning, members. I'll just briefly take you through the plan. So just in terms of the document itself, so it's essentially split into 3 sections. So there's an overview, there's a 3-year strategy and an annual plan. Members will recall from previous years, but just to give you a background about how we put the plan together. So it's drawn in consultation with the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, the Treasurer and Head of Finance. We look at the risk registers within the service. We look at our wider client base, all with a view to developing a 3-year strategy and a 1-year annual plan that covers all of the risks, or as many of the risks as we can, throughout that cycle. So some of the key themes, as you can see on, which I think is page 14 on your documents, page 1 or page 2 of the plan document, some of the key themes that we're finding emerging in some of our other clients and for yourselves are equality and diversity, health and well-being, Fire Safety Act and cybercrime. And you'll see within the strategy we've tried to cover each of those either as items in themselves, or we've picked them up previously as part of the risk mitigations review, where we look at a number of risks in one go. So the next thing I'd just like to say is we won't go through in detail in terms of what is included within the plan, as we've read that, but I'll just pick up on some items. So the aim overall is to provide a mix of governance, risk, financial, ICT and operational audits with a view to enabling us to provide an annual opinion based on the controls within the service. And the other thing I'd also say is with 70 days as in previous years. Perhaps it is also worth pointing out that you'll see in this year's annual plan, we've included items for co-location, contract management and sustainable procurement. So I think that demonstrates that the plan is kind of an ongoing document. So there are areas we've not picked up before. So it's not a static document where we're just including the same things over and over again. Although there are some elements, particularly around finance and governance, that we'd look to include as part of the cyclical basis. So as I say, I won't go through the detail of the document, but I'm happy to take any questions on either the 3-year rolling strategy or the annual plan itself.
Thanks for that. I'm sorry for forgetting to introduce you, Steen, and Nick Selwyn when I was making my recommendations. I'm sorry about that. But it's been a pleasure to hear your report regularly anyway. Would anybody like to ask Steen any questions regarding the report?
Yeah, Geraint Thomas is indicating, and also Councillor Smith is indicating.
Yeah. Gareth, would you like to come in first?
Yeah, just to sort of add to comments, really. Obviously, the first one is it's an indicative plan, which is states at the front of the report. Any changes, if there's any key themes that arise during the year when we be presenting reports, either through monitoring reports, or, any other reports that we'll be presenting risks, etc. If there's changing or emerging themes, the plan is obviously flexible and can be changed at that point, in consultation with members. So happy to change it through the year, so it's not fixed. And the other one, just to sort of raise the issue, the point that Steen made about sustainable procurement. Obviously, there's a report later on, the Audit Wales report around carbon reduction. So it's sort of picking up on those emerging themes and making sure that those type of reports are captured by the internal audit through the year as well. So they'll feed into the recommendations that have been made by Audit Wales then.
Yeah, thanks for that, Geraint. Do you want to add anything to that before I allow Councillor Smith to ask a question? No? Councillor?
No, thanks very much,
Val?
Chairman.
Sorry.
I think it's a very good report. It's a very comprehensive. It's a good survey of the authority, isn't it? In point 1, just for clarification in my mind, and I'm sure it's right, if the decision today is that we approve the internal audit plan with this the producers for 3 years, and then there's the option for an additional 2. So the approval we give today is for the plan for 3 years, but then presumably at the end of 3 years, if it's satisfactory, the authority can just roll on for 2 more years.
So we do come back on that one, Steve?
Yeah,
yeah. Obviously, in March, the actual contract for the internal audit provision came to an end, and we ran a tender process right close at the end of March. TIA were the successful bidders in the tender process. So the initial contract runs for 3 years, hence the 3-year plan. But the contract for the provision of services has got an option to extend for a further 2. And that's something that we've taken. Obviously, we review the service provision as we're getting close to the end of the 3 years. But for the last 2 iterations of the contract, we've always taken that option to extend into the further 2 years.
Yeah, no, that's clarified. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, like the question I'd ask, it's just that it's good to see it's a rolling document and it's not fixed in its approach and can be adjusted as and when needed, as Garen has said. But no, that's great. Thank you very much. Anything you'd like to add onto that, Steen? Or
I don't know, just to echo what Garrett said, yeah, the plan is flexible. You'll have seen in previous years we've adjusted and as I talk you through the annual report, we'll see there's elements that are additional and changes, so it's always a flexible plan because risks and your priorities change either during the year or over the 3-year programme. But just for clarification, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but the approval is for the annual plan rather than related to our appointment over the 3 years.
Yeah. If I can come back, Chairman, please, if I may.
Yeah, by all means, go.
I've forgotten that meeting where we'd approved that. Can I just say, I find your reports very readable. The presentation, as I've said, I always like colour, but no, they're very readable. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
You got bonus points, Steen.
Yeah, thank you. I think we do test drive it over time, I guess. Excuse me. So yeah, we do try to make sure it's readable, presentable. Yeah, we kind of test drive it over time. So, but each year we try to improve on it a little bit each year. Members will recall years gone past where we've not had graphics, but we're now using graphics and making it much better. And you probably don't see the whole detail of the report. We're trying to move to more an exception-based report as well, to make it less of the detail and more readable for the users of the reports. So thanks for that. And I'll feed that back to my team.
It's good.
That's good. Any more questions for Steen now before we move on? No. What recommendation that members approve the internal audit annual plan for 2022 to 2023? So somebody can propose and second it.
I'll propose.
I'll second that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you both.
And we'll take a roll call now, Chair.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, if we could do a roll call, it'd be great.
So just to take the votes on that recommendation, Councillor Colbrand?
Yes, in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Drake?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Hussey?
In favour.
Councillor Morgans?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Yep, support.
Thank you. And Councillor White?
In support.
Thank you very much. That was unanimous, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for that. We now move on to item 7, which is Audit Wales inquiries to those charged with governance. It's a draft response on page 23.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this report provides a draft response to the Audit Wales paper on those charged with governance when approving financial statements. So Audit Wales requests that we provide stance on a series of questions that are attached in Appendix 1. So those charged with governance would be the fire authority. Management also provide their response. The questions focus on 3 key areas as identified by international standards of auditing. So the areas are to consider fraud in the organisation, the risk of fraud, and how we manage fraud, consideration of laws and regulations in relation to audit of our financial statements, and whether we've got a sufficient understanding of related party relationships and transactions when we are completing the financial statements. So this questionnaire really relates to it and gives the auditor a view of how we manage our processes and affairs in regards to the annual statutory statement of accounts. So we provide this response so that Audit Wales can inform their understanding of the authority and its business processes and support their audit work, which commences in June after the draft accounts are prepared. And it helps them in providing an audit opinion for the year ending 2021-22. So if you look at Appendix 1, this is divided then into 3 key areas: fraud, laws, regulations, and related parties. And there's a variety of questions there. Audit Wales very kindly provided the responses that we gave last year on behalf of management and those charged with governance, so members. It hasn't changed very much. So these responses are there for your consideration and to forward on to Audit Wales if you see fit. I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Lisa? No. The only thing I was going to ask is, we've had nothing regarding any fraud within the organisation within this term. I just want to reiterate that. That's great. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions that anybody wants to ask about that report?
No.
No? Susan? No? So, the excuse me, the recommendation that the Fire and Rescue Authority confirmed its response to the Audit Wales questions as detailed in Appendix 1, which was attached in the report. So if somebody could promote and second that would be great.
Yeah, I'll move.
Second, Chair.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm full up with a cold, Emma.
You keep it down that end.
If you'd like to do a roll call, please, Sarah.
Certainly, Chair. Councillor Cole-Brown.
Yes, in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Drake.
In favour.
Yes. Councillor Evans.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Councillor Morgans.
In favour.
Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Thank you. And Councillor White.
Agree with the report.
Thank you very much. That was unanimous again, Chair.
That's great. Thanks, members, for that. If we move on to item 8, which is now the Audit Wales Carbon Emissions Reduction Report, and that's on page 41. I think that's Garen. Are you leading on that?
Well, yeah, I could lead that, but we've got Nick Selwyn who's drafted the report for Audit Wales. So if I leave Nick present the report, and then I'll come back with some observations, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Morning, Chair, and good morning, members. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Just to let you know, we've also got 2 colleagues with us from Audit Wales. Jenny Morris, who deals with the account side of our work, and you'll probably see her, if you're an officer for sure, remotely, hopefully in person not too soon. And then my colleague Charles, who's been involved in this particular review. Taking the comments made by Councillor Smith, I'm going to try and present something now, which is always a challenge I find online, and hopefully it'll add a bit of colour to the event and make it a bit more interesting than someone just talking to a report. So hopefully that should have come up on your screens. Can someone tell me if that's turned up, please?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I can see that. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So what I've got before you is a presentation that just runs through the key conclusions from our work. And I'll give a sort of a brief overview of what we've done, undertaken, provide a summary, I guess, of our key conclusions, and then happy to take any questions from members, but obviously interested in Geraint's response as well and anything he wishes to add to the picture. So, I mean, the starting point really is, why did we undertake this piece of work? And I think you're probably all aware of the challenges that faces the world at this time with regards to carbon emissions and the impact it's having on the planet. And we've known for some time that the way humanity has been living and using up resources has had a negative impact. And in many ways, the Conference of Parties event held in Glasgow last year, COP26, really brought into focus that we are at the point now where some big decisions have to be made in terms of how all of us change our ways of living to make the planet more sustainable. And these are just some sort of headlines from the newspapers at that time when the conference was taking place to really give you a sense of the severity of the issues. So you can really see that this is a matter that is important for everyone in Wales, in fact, everyone on the planet. In terms of Wales specifically, the Welsh Government adopted in 2016 an Environment Act, which set some really high-level targets that they wanted to see some improvements against, one of which is to see carbon emissions fall by 95% in the next 34 years, but they're also looking to see a carbon-neutral public sector by 2030. So that means that your contribution to carbon is at least negated by other things that you undertake. So you are seeing a reduction in how you run your organization and the decisions you make in terms of assets, fleet, that sort of thing. So that just gives you the strategic context why this is a really important topic. In terms of our work then, we always start with an overall question that we seek to answer. And on this occasion, we set the question, is the authority making good progress in reducing its carbon emissions and fully contributing to Wales's public sector becoming carbon neutral by 2030? And the report before you, members, is really split into 4 areas. And we sort of try to structure it around these sort of 4 themes. Firstly, knowing your starting point. Do you have good quality information that really allows you to understand how you're running your organization and the impact it has on the environment? Secondly, do you have a plan in place or a series of plans that show your commitment to address carbon reduction? Thirdly, how well are you performing in delivering that plan? And then finally, do you have good systems in place to judge and evaluate performance to know that the things you're doing are really working? And our overall conclusion is that we saw some really good positive work within the authority, and we think that you are driving the agenda really positively and creating the right infrastructure to become carbon neutral. But we think that there's some more work you need to do around some of the targets you've set to really strengthen how you focus on those and take them forward. And you've probably got 1 or 2 big risks that you still need to bottom out and work through. Saying that,
sorry to stop. Are the slides supposed to be changing?
They are on my screen. Are they not on yours?
No, they're still on the cover screen.
Okay, sorry about that. Has it changed now?
No, it's just on the initial one, yeah.
Oh dear, I really am sorry.
You need to put it on. Is it read?
Yeah.
To be opened up without that.
I knew it would fail me, the technology.
Welcome to my world.
It needs to be opened with the book open. Is that read? I think it's with the book open. You need to open it on that.
Ah, right. So where would I find that?
Don't start. Nick, don't start the presentation in slideshow mode. Just open your PowerPoint up.
Ah, right. So you just do it from. I get you.
Yeah, if you open your PowerPoint and share your PowerPoint screen. Right now, down in the right-hand corner,
yeah,
you'll see your little icons. One of which is a little book. Further left than that, that one there. That's the one.
Has that turned up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should be, try moving forward from there. You should be okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That's better.
Oh, there you go. You missed the slide I had, which was by far the most interesting one. Apologies for that. I won't repeat myself because I'm conscious you've got a busy agenda. Well, I've learned something new today, so that's been really helpful. Thanks, Chris. So, as I was saying, this is basically our overall conclusion, that we feel the authority is getting the right infrastructure in place to start addressing the challenges it faces with regards to carbon emissions reduction, and is making progress becoming carbon neutral. But in some areas, you need to sort of strengthen your targets and the plans adopted. And there's some big decisions you have to make around certain areas. So I'll very briefly run through each of the sections of our report just to give you a flavour of our key findings. So the starting point really is knowing where you are at this point. And we can see that you've done a lot of work in developing your baseline. and you've captured quite a range of information on carbon emissions at this point, and you're aware fully of the gaps you have in the information, and you've got plans in place to address these. So for us, we can see that you are making good progress. You've got good data on business miles, fleet, energy consumption, and these are really critical to you getting a good handle on how the organisation is operating with regards to carbon. The things that we sort of, identified that could be strengthened, some of the data is historic. At the time of our audit, wasn't current. So there's obviously a need to ensure you've got the most up-to-date and accurate information, so your plans are really based on the most accurate data you've got available. We can see that in some areas, there's a few things you could pick up on. Water metering is one, measuring and capturing offsetting activity, which is really important. And then one third area, which is Scope 3 indirect emissions. So when you buy services and goods, the contribution those bodies that you're purchasing from make to carbon, and really capturing that information. That's by far the hardest one to get accurate details on, but it's certainly one that's challenging pretty much for the public sector across the board. So in terms of planning your approach, you've got two key plans that you've put in place. One is the carbon reduction plan, and the other one is the biodiversity and ecosystems resilience plan. And our reading of these and our sort of review of the information and the interviews we held with officers give us a good sense of the priorities you've set, and we think you're looking at the right areas to really start making some big changes around how you produce carbon. So all the things we would expect to see are included: work on building in the estates, how you're addressing fleet challenges and transport, procurement of services, how you're contributing to offsetting through use of your land, and how you're changing your operational practices and trying to influence the behaviour partners to really start playing their role as well. So these are the 5 key areas we would say that organisations should be picking up, and your plans clearly focus on these things. If we were going to be critical, I guess the thing that we would say is that you've got a very ambitious programme with 76 commitments for delivery in 2021, which was the last reported performance at the time of our audit. And a number of these had not really progressed to the point of being delivered. So, we're conscious that we've had the pandemic. Life's been very different for all public bodies and how they deliver services. But if there's one thing that, you could sort of benefit from doing is reviewing the action plan to ensure you are tightening up some of the definitions and deliverables so you can really demonstrate the impact between actions and the reduction in carbon. One of the things we did do for this review is survey staff as well, and we're really grateful for the assistant Geraint and colleagues gave to us to conduct this survey, and they give us a good understanding of where staff within the organisation and across the organisation see some of the challenges around carbon. The one thing I would say is that they've got a broad awareness of where you need to be, but probably could be more engaged in some aspects, because one of the things that's central to being successful in this area is getting the entire organisation on board, and that's really important. But again, I think you are starting from a pretty good point, in the sense that you have a member environmental champion who'd been appointed at the time we did the review. I believe that's Councillor White, who's on the call today. And we do know that the staff are very aware where the big barriers are and the things that you need to focus on. So it's not necessarily a negative conclusion. I think what it does show is that this is a difficult agenda, and there are some areas you could improve on. In terms of delivering the plan, then, I think what we come to the conclusion is that we can see that you are making progress in quite a few areas. But as noted at the start, there are some big challenges that remain. So when you look at buildings and estates as a starting point, we can see that you've invested a huge amount of money in modernising aspects of your estate to make them as efficient as possible and to reduce your carbon footprint. Stuff like installation of energy efficiency measures, low carbon producing lighting, new technology, replacement of older, more dormant boiler systems, so you've got the most efficient systems in place. And then practical things like linking appliance bay doors to heating controls, so you're not sort of burning energy when vehicles are going out and about. And you do sort of take quite seriously the opportunities to collaborate. So in terms of buildings and estates, we think you're doing some really good positive things, and there's a lot to really build on to take forward. Probably the area that we feel that there's probably the biggest challenge for the authorities in regards to fleet, because we know that this is your mainstay in terms of service delivery, and it's a big important part of your work. Whilst you've made some good progress in terms of use of electric and hybrid vehicles, particularly in the wide fleet, we know that replacing appliances is going to be quite challenging, particularly in terms of cost. You adopted a sustainable procurement policy, which gives some good information about some of these challenges. And just at a simple level, from our work, we can see that on average, you spend £300,000 for a replacement diesel appliance, but the current technology suggests you're going to be spending somewhere in the region of 600,000. So that's doubling the cost you're going to have to find to invest in new vehicles. And there's also an issue about the life cycle of vehicles. Whilst this is still an emerging technology and there's nothing really bottomed out and in place as such, it's very clear that there is some concern that electric vehicles may need to be replaced far sooner than diesel vehicles. So that will add an additional cost to your planning and obviously your procurement. So as well as the vehicles, there's also the infrastructure you're going to need to switch to a low carbon fleet. And we know that you've made some really positive progress with some funding that you've set aside to introduce charging points at your headquarters site at Cardiff Gate and a number of the strategic stations. But it's very clear that the level of investment that's going to be required going forward is going to have to be ramped up significantly. The best data at the time of our review, produced by the UK government, estimated that between 2022 and 2030, you're going to have to see a tenfold increase in charging points across the country. So we know that this is a big issue that's going to be affecting not just yourselves, but public sector partners. And we know that that's an area that, it does offer some opportunity for you to work with other public bodies within South Wales to really make best use of the public sector charging network. Some work had taken place at the time of our review, but I think that had probably stymied a wee bit with the pandemic. I know that you've been in discussions with Caerphilly, and the Cardiff City region have got some plans that they're looking to bring forward. So it's something that's on the agenda, but obviously something you need to push forward. Just to then give you a sense of where you stand in comparison to other fire and rescue authorities in Wales, this is published information produced by the Office of National Statistics. So it compares the three force areas and the number of charging points available and fast charging points. And it's the rapid charging devices which are really important with regards to public bodies, I guess. And you can see that you're well positioned in comparison to North Wales and Mid and West, and slightly behind North Wales in terms of the overall number of charging points. But this is, a challenge for the public sector across the board, not just the Fire and Rescue Authority. In terms of offsetting, just to clarify, this is where you undertake work to soak up CO2 that comes into the environment through things like planting trees, biodiversity projects. And through our review, we saw that you've actually undertaken some really innovative and quite positive activity in this area. So things like the Wellbeing Gardens in Maesteg and Ely, that's really positive. The Beehive at Ebervale, that's making a great contribution to biodiversity in that community. And things like rainwater harvesting, where you collect grey water, store it and reuse it, that's a really positive way of really lowering your emissions and contributing to saving resources. And then things like the green roof at the Hirwine station, which allows you to soak up more CO2, but also provide a contribution to biodiversity in that area. And we're well aware that you've participated in a number of initiatives across South Wales in terms of tree planting. So offsetting, we know you don't own a huge amount of land and you need to sweat your assets a little bit more cleverly than most, but you are doing some really good things with regards to offsetting. Then the final one we looked at in terms of delivering the plan was really the operational and partnership working. So, are you doing things internally that sort of allow your workforce and members to reduce their carbon emissions and find ways of working that makes best value in terms of the equipment that you hold? What we can see is that you are doing some really positive things. So your continued support for Operation Florian, that's really good, where you're recycling older equipment and seeing it get a second lease of life. And the work you're doing with the Philippines is really positive. And we know that you've introduced initiatives like reducing single-use plastics, provision of aluminium water bottles to staff. I mean, these may sound like small beer, but they all add up and collectively can make a really big difference. And then things like switching to home working and active travel initiatives that you've pursued, so that the authority is doing some really good work in this area. I think the one thing that we would sort of pick out as one aspect you should think about going forward, and an area that maybe would benefit from some additional work, is how you engage the workforce to ensure they're playing as an active a role as they can. So, I mean, there's generally, from our survey, a lack of awareness of plans within services and an opportunity to ensure staff contribute ideas and suggestions a bit more. These are people who are at the front line and can make a difference in terms of the work you undertake. But overall, we can see some really positive direction of travel here as well. Then the final bit of our report talks about how you understand and monitor and evaluate progress to determine whether you are making any difference. And I guess this is a sort of a mixture of conclusions. We know that you've got a good system for reporting and challenging performance. And I know that in our past reports to the authority, we've referenced our positive view of the BEMA system. We think your management information is pretty good, and you've got good information coming through that allow you to really drill down and challenge performance as members. The one thing we would say is on this particular area, some of the targets you'd set had slipped and some actions hadn't been completed. So that meant you were probably behind where you would want to be at this stage. And whilst you do provide good monitoring information to report against, the one area that we feel would benefit from is being more specific and clear about how that's progressing against the Welsh Government's requirements, the targets Welsh Government have, and maybe comparing your performance with others just to see if there's anything you could learn from other organisations that will allow you to really show what you're doing well and where you need to strengthen current practice. Then finally, members, the report includes 5 recommendations. I've put them up on that slide, but basically it's mirroring the findings that I've just run through. Firstly, to improve the quality of the carbon baseline, really get up to date, and add in the bits you've not got. Secondly, to review some of the actions you have in your plans, just to tighten the definitions to ensure you're focusing on the things that will provide the best return for you. Thirdly, and probably the most important one, is how you take forward your vehicle replacement program, because that's going to be quite challenging with the amount of money you're going to have to invest in this area. And we know that's a common problem for all fire and rescue authorities in the UK. Fourthly, engaging and involving staff in planning carbon emissions reduction work to ensure they take ownership of this agenda. And then the final one really is just to ensure that when you're monitoring activity, you are clearly showing how you're progressing against Welsh Government targets. So apologies for the slip up at the start when I wasn't moving the slides on, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of our work and what we've done. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks for that report, very comprehensive. Did you want to come back in, Karen, first? I was going to ask David to come in first because
I was going to say Councillor White and myself met with Nick and his colleagues as part of the review that was ongoing. So I think probably rightly as sort of environmental champion, if Councillor White comes in first.
Yeah, no, that's great. David, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Nick, for the report, and thank you for meeting with us. I always see reports like this as opportunities to learn. And although we can use COVID as an excuse, and to some extent it is an excuse, but going forward, we're definitely going to take the report and to see the areas where we have done good and be proud of those areas, but the areas where we need to tighten on, and we'll make sure that we are tightening on those areas. Now, what has impressed me over the last sort of year is some of the individual working fire stations who are taking this ownership of this, in regard to their own fire stations, like some of the work in my segment, Jan Vale, and some of the areas you mentioned. And that's what I'm really proud of, some of the work that they're doing. In regards to vehicles, I know Welsh Government are looking at the heavier HGV vehicles and electric, and it's my understanding that we're hanging back a bit because we're wary that there could be some grants coming forward in regards to obtaining electric vehicles from Welsh Government. So we take on board what you're saying about our vehicles, but it's my understanding, and I'm sure Gareth will correct me if I'm wrong, that we know Welsh Government are looking at this at the more the HGV. And I know, for instance, in my own patch in Bridgend Borough Council, here I've been trialling an ash cart vehicle, electric ash cart vehicle, which has been successful. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we're going to see more progress made in that area. In regards to the report as a whole, it is mixed. I'll take on board the positives and be proud of the positives. And, maybe we can look at doing more reports back to the full Fire Authority Committee to make sure we keep ourselves on our toes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that, David. Karen, did you want to come in with anything else extra on that?
Yeah, just a few points really. Obviously, following the discussions that myself and Councillor White had with our audit colleagues, the initial draft report was presented, and there was I fed some feedback around some of the challenges, which aren't just challenges for us as a service, but they're challenges for every public sector body. And all the feedback that I fed in was taken on board and put into the report. Yeah, one of the biggest areas is around fleet and the cost and investment. And as Councillor White said, we did pursue grant funding. There was grant funding made available by Welsh Government. around about December time, they offered up right across the public sector in Wales, and they were targeting specifically the replacement for diesel vans and diesel minibuses, and they made grant funding available, and we put in a bid because the differential in price between a standard diesel van that we were looking to replace and the electric version, there was a £45,000 difference. So we submitted a bid for 10 vehicles, and I think Welsh Government were a bit overwhelmed by the amount of interest that they had across the public sector, and everybody's obviously putting in similar level bids. Whilst the funding was pretty much there, the biggest problem was nobody could get the vehicles delivered before the end of March. So we put the bid in, constantly chasing to see about the money, but because we couldn't get vehicles delivered, the opportunity was lost. So I've made representations to Welsh Government to see if that money can be rolled over, but unfortunately they said it's a missed opportunity, but they're looking to secure funding again this year. So hopefully the early engagement will sort of reap benefits and hopefully come forward with some additional grant funding. But as is touched on in the report, the biggest side of the challenge is around the heavy goods vehicles. And in all likeliness is, we'll be looking at, the direction of travel with hydrogen vehicles for the bigger vehicles. As I say, the double of the cost of an appliance at the moment is probably something that we're not likely to pursue in the short term. Just a couple of other points then. Some of the charging points, I think at the time of the report there were 6 stations. They now up to 11 stations, and that was part of the grant funding that we did get. So we had an additional 5 stations who've got charging points on. We are working constantly with our PSB partners to try and engage around active travel and public sector charging points that we can share across all of our services. Green space on stations is always going to be a challenge because just by their nature, fire stations are built to be fit for purpose fire stations. So we are limited in what we can deliver with green space, but it is excellent, as Councillor White said, the work that each station are doing and trying to take some ownership. Probably just to finish off, one of the biggest challenges we got in terms of sort of recording and capturing our data and reporting, there's a standard template for reporting to Welsh Government each year now on the carbon reduction and carbon initiatives. It's a very complex reporting tool. It's very onerous, and the feedback that's been made, I think, right across the public sector is that it's a bit too onerous. There's a bit there's too much. It's too complex. It isn't sort of one size fits all, or that's what it's expected to do. But it certainly doesn't look at individual organisations and the challenges they'd have to meet in complying with the requirements. But that's an ongoing piece of work, and there is a workshop Lisa and I are attending this week, which hopefully will give us more information on complying with that. And finally, then, in terms of some of the work that we got ongoing, unfortunately, our sustainability officer left the service for personal reasons at the end of March, but we're going out to advert next week for a replacement. And this week we've had a graduate from part of the All Wales graduate scheme. There's a graduate started with us on a shared basis for the next 2 years, shared with Harvard Housing, and they'll be looking at a lot of the data capture, data reporting, and the first big project they're looking at is working on our sustainable procurement. So hopefully it just gives a flavour to members that we are taking this serious, and there's a lot of work ongoing in the background to meet some of those recommendations in the report.
Excellent, thanks, Karen. You've covered a lot of that. My concern was particularly in the report where they're saying that we slowed up on a few. But as you know, I'm well aware about the fleet because that's my forte. But there are challenges on procurement and there are challenges on technologies, and the service is trying to adapt as quick as they can with what they can get hold of. Because as you rightly said, a lot of this equipment is specialist equipment. You can't just pick it off the shelf. So, it's things that we need to be mindful of. There may be delays, and that's what's affecting it overall. But I agree with a lot of what's gone in the report. There's a lot of good positives, and David's right. The service will take up and look into the ones that are not moving forward as quick. But yeah, no, excellent report. Any other questions that asked Nick Selwyn or
Councillor Smith is indicating.
Yeah, I was going to ask who the sustainability officer was, but it's been and gone. But I think very good to have the appointment of a graduate who's shared. You get a wider experience as well from another setup. I don't know, but that's good. My specific question was, apparently in the report it said only 28.2% of members of staff responded. How many members of staff actually responded? We've got percentages there on little bullet point 17. 28.2% of those members of staff, but doesn't actually say how many members of staff did respond.
I think it was around 190, Councillor.
It's a small number, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we provided the survey, and Geraint kindly published it to all members of staff in the organisation. We have no way of enforcing people filling it in, and it's self-selection. So I think we had a fair number from the corporate side of the service, but also quite a number from some of the stations as well. And we take, in the greatest will in the world, we'd like to get a higher number, but we feel it gives us sufficient to be able to get a flavour of some of the issues.
Yeah. Well, you've got a response from somebody. It'd be better if there were more involved. No, I think the carbon training that I went through was very useful, and to be able to picture in my mind a sort of semi-detached is a ton of carbon. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
Chair, if I can just add to that. One of the things I'd fed back to all the colleagues at the time was we'd sort of just gone out. We'd had about 3 or 4 surveys had gone out just before it, and I think there was a bit of survey fatigue across staff, so that probably led to a bit of a lower response than we would have hoped. One of the things that we are looking at in terms of the engagement is Lisa is going to be chairing an environment steering group, which is represented by every single department and location across our service. So that's one of the ways we're looking at targeting engagement and making sure that the messaging is getting across, but also the feedback, and information is a two-way process, so that engagement is going on right across the service then.
You can't see it, you can't feel it. It's very hard for people to imagine. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's a very worthwhile idea, to be honest, Geraint, and then everybody's got an input, for improvement. That's great. Any other questions now for Nick before we move on?
No, not a question, Steve, but I'd like to bring in a response as regard the funding from Welsh Government. I'm disappointed, obviously, that we missed out. But surely we could utilise our positions now to press Senedd members for more funding, for grants for us to continue.
Yeah, I did picking up on that point, Councillor Morgan. The chief and the chair had a meeting last week with the deputy minister who attended the passing out parade, and it's one of the areas I'd asked for the chief to raise with the deputy minister, because it's obviously something they're keen to pursue and push as Welsh Government. It's unfortunate that the funding mechanism led to a sort of missed opportunity, but certainly asked that message to be pushed home.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure we could utilise our positions there with our local Senedd members. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, for that.
Councillor Drake is indicating.
Yeah, Councillor Drake.
Yeah, what is the update on procuring these new vehicles? Because you did say there was difficulties. Probably everything's being held up at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously the fleet engineer was just holding off to see if funding was available. He's sort of pushing me all the time now to make the decision whether to order the diesel type vehicles, and that's not something I particularly want him to go down that route and just order a standard 10 diesel vehicles. So I'm asking him to try and extend the life of the existing vehicles while I continue to sort of push Welsh Government to chase funding this year.
Well, it looks like everything is being held up on certain parts of the finance part there, really, isn't it? So.
Just to add, Chair, one of the other challenges, I mean, and this is a very real one, and Geraint's touched on it to an extent, is that the technology hasn't really caught up with the challenge we face. So at the time we undertook our review, we were aware of only one serviceable electric appliance in place, and that was in Australia, in Victoria. And you bear in mind, they've got a very different environment to Wales. Lots of sun for a start, which is always helpful when you've got to recharge vehicles. And it worked primarily in Melbourne, which is a city of about 4 million people. So it's very much an urban type service, not the areas you cover in South Wales, which is quite rural in parts and quite difficult geographically to always work within. And the travel distances that you're talking about for electric vehicles compared to diesel, they probably do less than a third in terms of the comparison like for recharge. So, I mean, we are conscious, as Geraint quite rightly says, this is the big risk, that you face, that you need technology to catch up. But everyone needs technology to catch up because it's not just the Fire and Rescue Authority.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I've been in the trade for 40 odd years and we're still trying to catch up now. Any other questions for Nick regarding the audit report, which is an excellent report, I must admit? No? If not, then we'll move on to the recommendations. That members note the content and accept the audit Wales carbon emissions reduction report. If somebody can move that and second it, please.
Yes. Move.
I'll move it to second.
Okay, thanks for that. Sarah, would you like to do a...
Lovely, Chair. Yeah. Councillor Colbrand. Oh, we've just lost. Councillor Drake.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, support.
Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Morgans.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor White.
In favour.
Thank you. And I see Councillor Colbrand came back immediately. Councillor Colbrand.
I pressed the wrong button on this thing. Sorry about that. I disconnected myself. But yes, I'm in favour of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was unanimous again, Chair.
That's great. Thanks, members, for that. We now move on to the next item, which is item 9. It's the internal audit progress report and audit action update, and that's on page 61. And I think
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, it's me. Thank you, Chair. This report is designed to update members upon progress being made against the internal audit plan for this year, for the year that's just closed. So there's 2022. 3 audits have been undertaken and completed since previous FAPM meetings. The Equality and Diversity Audit, Death in Service and Benefit Scheme, and lastly, the Financial Controls. And we've got Steve Golay here from TIAA to take us through the detail of that. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, as Lisa says, so I've got 3 reports: Equality and Diversity, Death in Service Benefits Scheme, and Key Financial Controls. There's also the Progress Report.
Sorry, Steen, your microphone is very quiet at the moment. We're struggling hearing you here.
I'll bring my laptop closer to me. Is that better?
No.
I think you might have to shout.
Okay.
It's just your room, I think, Sarah. It's fine.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, that must be us at HQ. Apologies for that.
Okay.
Can we carry on, Steve?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so 3 reports and a progress report. If I start with the Equality and Diversity report, you'll have an executive summary in your pack. So I think it's page 66 in your pack. So you'll see it's a substantial assurance opinion. For this particular audit we're looking at, is there a strategic equality plan or strategy in place? And if there is, are the actions being addressed and implemented as planned? As you can see, just 2 routine recommendations. So overall, a good level of assurance, excellent level of assurance in terms of substantial assurance. So there is the plan, there is action plans in place, which should be adhered to. I think just one area of good practice to note. So clear and comprehensive documents being compiled to assist transition from equality and practice assessments to integrated assessments, and some of the additional features in that include looking at socioeconomic issues, as well as covering off issues around the Wellbeing Future Generations Act and goals. So I think obviously that's good practice. As I say, there's just 2 routine recommendations, just housekeeping really. So the first one is the review of the risk register, highlighted that some of the terms were slightly out. So the inclusivity group is now the inclusivity workforce group. So that'll need to be amended within the departmental risk register. And also at the time of the audit, the annual equality report hadn't been produced. But that was just in terms of a timing issue, so it wasn't due till the 31st of March. And both of those recommendations were accepted. So I'm happy to take any questions on the Equality and Diversity report.
Has anybody got any questions for Stephen regarding that, the equality? No. I know the service is trying as much as possible to get people of all genders and equality through the service. And there was a very good advertisement in a paper where a young lady was only about 5 foot something, and it was just a senior fire officer was at about 6'7". So, I mean, it done tremendous thing for the service to prove that we're trying to bring as many different people in the organisation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Evans. So the next
carry on, yeah.
Yeah, the next one we've got is the Death in Service Benefits Review. As I said, in terms of the annual plan, this is an audit that was agreed in the year, so we've undertaken this one in replacement of the Brexit audit. So again, a good level of assurance, a reasonable assurance opinion. The kind of things we're looking at here are all administration of the scheme itself, so joining and leaving the scheme, how you make payments in the event of a death, to ensure that they're timely and accurate, and also the payment deductions from staff who are entered into the scheme are accurate as well. As you see, just one important recommendation. Some of the key findings are the procedures and template documents in place, which is good, but there was one recommendation, which is an important recommendation. The review identified that the spreadsheet relating to the members of the scheme was being used alongside the core HR. Obviously, core HR being the prime system should be the key record for holding information. There's risk around accuracy in terms of if you're keeping 2 separate records. So again, I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Anybody like to ask any questions regarding that report? No, that's fine.
I'll have to get rid of all my paper, won't I? I can see the logic of it. No, it's fine, Chairman. It just made me smile.
All right. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
No other questions regarding that report? If you'd like to move on to the next one, then, Steve.
Yeah, so the next report is the Key Financials Controls Report. Again, members, be aware that we do this review on an annual basis. So some of the areas we're looking at are budget control, general ledger, cash bank and treasury management, cash flow planning, income and debtors, payments, payroll and security of assets. Reasonable assurance this time round. Although there are no recommendations, one recommendation was made in previous years that relating to the update of the financial procedure rules is still outstanding. So we've only given it reasonable assurance because that one recommendation is still outstanding from previous years. But overall, obviously a good level of assurance, and none of the compliance testing that we undertook found any issues or incurred any recommendations. So again, I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Yeah. Any other questions regarding that key financial part? No? Well, I think you got away quite easy, Steve. Lisa, do you need to come back in regarding any of that report, or?
No, just the recommendations, just to note contents of the reports and to move them. Yeah.
Right, if there's no other questions, then if the recommendation, the members are asked to note the internal audit recommendation recommendations and work completed to date on the internal audit annual plan 2021 to 2022. So somebody can propose and second that, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'll propose those, Chair.
I'll second.
Thank you. Chair, would you like to do a roll call?
But we don't need two full reports for information, just move and second.
Oh, that's all right then. There you are. It's even easier for you then. The next one, we move on to item 10 then, which is the internal annual report ending 31st of March 2022. And that's page 85, that one.
Chair, this is a brief report. It's a standard report that comes to members each year, and it provides an update on the internal audit plan for the year closing 2021-22. And I'll pass you back to Steve to give you more.
Paul Steen's working for his money today.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think I've probably got two left. Thanks, Councillor Evans. So I've got two left. So the what we call the summary internal controls assurance report, which is just a progress report. We've also got the annual report, which is on the next item. So just briefly in terms of the progress report, I've just presented the kind of three of the reports. You'll see on page 76 of your pack, we also included a mitigating controls report. I think there was a timing issue in terms of when this was produced and when the pack came. So the mitigating controls audit will need to come to the next audit, next FAPM meeting. But just in terms of that document, the progress document, there's a couple of things to point out. In terms of other matters, so page 78, we've issued a couple of briefing notes since the last audit FAPM committee. One around increased cybercrime security risks. Our IT colleagues are informing us that the number of attacks has gone up significantly since the conflict in Ukraine has started. So it's something to be aware of. The next one then, guidance to public bodies in Wales. That's something that the Public Sector Ombudsman Wales has produced in relation to document retention and good records management. And then the final one is Amazon and Visa settlement dispute. I think that's probably the third of these related briefing notes. So initially, Amazon weren't going to be using Visa payments, as I'm sure you're all aware. Then they put it on hold, and now they've settled the dispute. So that's the kind of the third one. And other than that, there's no fraud alerts to make note of. Just in terms of the progress of the plan, Appendix B, all of the work is now complete in terms of field work. The one report outstanding is in relation to ICT cybersecurity. My colleague who undertook the review has been unwell, but hopefully he's back in this week and we'll be able to get that report to the service to consider. So happy to take any questions on the progress report.
Anybody got any questions to raise for Steve now? No, they must be quick, clear and concise then, Steve. You've done a good job. Do you want to come back with anything now, Lisa, before we move forward, or?
Well, thank you, Chair.
No, that's great. The recommendations that the members note the work and overall opinion of the internal auditors for the financial year 2021 to 2022. So somebody can propose and second that. And that's for noting. So.
I propose that, Chair.
Somebody second it?
Second.
Thank you. Right, and then we move on to item 11 then, which is the annual report of the work of the Finance, Audit and Performance Management Committee and the Finance, Asset and Performance Management Scrutiny Group, which is page 95.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reporting to the committee. So this is the a draft of the annual report for the FAPM committee and its scrutiny group that is reported on an annual basis to the Fire Authority in its entirety. This report, because we missed the last meeting of the Fire Authority for this municipal year, will be reported to the first meeting of the Fire Authority in the next municipal year after the AGM. First meeting that occurs after the AGM. So this is the standard report, which I've changed the format of it slightly this year to make it easier to digest, hopefully. We've split it into two appendices. Appendix 1 looks at the work of the FAPM committee itself, and then Appendix 2 addresses the work that has been carried out by the FAPM scrutiny group. So just to take you through the structure, in Appendix 1 we identify the purpose of the committee and identify the financial elements that it's responsible for the fire authority. We then go through policy, audit or development. Apologies members, I've just noted that paragraph 3.3 in Appendix 1 needs updating with this year's audit programme. So I will make sure that that's amended when this gets submitted to the full fire authority. We then go through and talk about external audit and performance management, and then section 4 within that appendix looks at the scrutiny, and then section 5 identifies the additional areas of work still to be undertaken, which is the content of today's meeting. Moving on to Appendix 2 then, we identify the purpose of the FAPM scrutiny group and run through the financial responsibilities that it's discharged with. We then look at Section 3, the asset management responsibilities, and in Section 3.2 identified each of the strategies that the scrutiny group applied scrutiny to. And we've got some reports about that. We've also talked in Section 4 there about the appointment of member champions. We haven't included in that section there the environmental champion because that wasn't initially part of the remit of the scrutiny group. And there's been agreement throughout the committees that this section will be addressed at the AGM, so that the member champions can be drawn from the full fire authority as opposed to just members of the scrutiny group in future. Section 5 addresses the work that the scrutiny group did on the proposed committee reforms, and the further areas of scrutiny there were reported to the scrutiny group last week, which is why it appears in further areas of scrutiny. More than happy to take any questions from members, and my apologies again for the inaccuracy in paragraph 3.3 in appendix.
Okay. Any questions for Sarah? It's quite a big appendix.
Yeah. Only a comment, Chairman. Earlier in the report, 3.14. That the Business Fire Safety Annual Summary Report. That was an excellent report that we had. I recall that it was an exceptional report.
That's right. I agree.
You think it really made an impact, that one, as to what actually was being done. Unless I got my things muddled up, but no. Thank you very much. That was the only comment, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other than for apologies for not fulfilling my role regarding land and buildings.
All right.
Yeah, I met Nick a couple of times before he moved on, but I didn't know he'd moved on. But still, thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Val. Yeah, I mean, I was a fleet and engineering champion for how many years, and it's been a pleasure. But it just like Sarah said, it needed to go out to all the members of the authority to give everyone an equal chance to apply for the position.
Yeah, and the involvement there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sarah? No.
Just thank you to Sarah. Right.
Well, right, we'll leave it at that. The recommendations are that the members consider the report and making any necessary amendments to its content prior to reporting the Fire and Rescue Authority as a summary of the workload carried out by the Finance, Audit and Performance Management Committee and the Finance, Asset and Performance Management Scrutiny Group during the municipal year. So somebody can move a second hand, it's just for noting then.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. There we are then. Thank you very much for that. One of the last items is item 12. the Forward Work Programme 2021 to 22, and that's page 113. Is that yours, Sarah, or?
I'll take this one, Chair. The Forward Work Programme just concludes all of the work of the municipal year for the committee. Every item has now been finished off. Obviously, the ones that were on the agenda for today. Just to pass on thanks really to Chair and members for squeezing in this additional meeting today, because obviously there were some outstanding reports, mainly around the audit work, which needed to be concluded to finish off the municipal year. So really thanks for agreeing the additional date, and I appreciate how busy you are at present, but it's really grateful for squeezing today's meeting in.
Yeah, thanks to all the members, giving up their time for today for this extra meeting. It had to be done, and everybody turned up without any problems, and I compliment that. Anybody want to raise anything on the Forward Work Programme? I think it's pretty explanatory, isn't it? So
yes.
And then the last item is 13, to consider any items of business the chair deems urgent. The only thing is, good luck to everybody in their future endeavours. If they're finishing up, retiring, or going for the elections, best of luck from me.
Same to you, Chairman.
For the hard work they've done. Yeah.
Chairman, can I just say,
yes, well,
yeah, very, very briefly, that I thank the members, thank the officers for all the years that I've been involved with the fire service. I really have valued this involvement. None of us know what the future's got, so the best of luck to everybody, but sincere thanks to officers for the support over the years. Take care.
That's it, and I hope to see, if we're lucky and we come back, to see your lovely faces again on this format. Or in person if we're lucky. So with that, I'd like to close the meeting and thank everybody for their participation. All right, I've got new
yeah, we know what it means, Steve.
Yeah. And it's been great working with everyone. So yeah, I fell up with a cold now. So